Russian-Hungarian relations. Due to Russia's military invasion of Ukraine, sanctions were imposed on Russia as the aggressor country, but not everyone supported them. In particular, the introduction of new sanctions is not supported by Hungary. In order to understand why this happens, let us consider the history of Russian-Hungarian relations. During the Second World War, Hungary fought on the side of Nazi Germany. Therefore, after the end of the war, it fell into the zone of occupation in the sphere of Soviet influence. In 1948, the communist pro-Soviet Hungary party, led by Matthias Rákosi, came to power. He decided to lead Hungary along the Stalin's path. In 1956, the Hungarians wanted to break away from the communist regime and the popular uprising began. The communist Hungarian government asked the USSR for help and promptly received it. During these events, Soviet tanks entered Budapest and brutally suppressed the uprising. Also, a few years after the Second World War, Hungary became a full-fledged founder of the Council for Mutual Economic Assistance, which included mainly the countries of the Socialist Bloc led by the USSR. This allowed the USSR to buy Icarus buses and Globus canned food from Hungary at better price. After the collapse of the USSR, Hungary also lost its sales markets. Production of the famous buses began to fall. Today, Hungary is a part of the European Union. The accession of Hungary to the European Union has had a beneficial effect on only a tenth of the Hungarian economy. To avoid bankruptcy, the Hungarian government, headed by Viktor Orban, has forced to develop and implement a new economic policy. Russia became one of the countries with which Hungary began to develop foreign economic relations. In 2014, an agreement was signed on Russia's participation in the construction of 2 new reactors at the Paks nuclear power plant using Russian technologies. As a part of this agreement, Russia provided Hungary with a loan of up to 10 billion euros for a period of 30 years at 4.5% per annum. Viktor Orban stated that in the current turbulent world, relations with Russia are of particular importance for Hungary. Therefore, it is not surprising that in the spring of 2014, after the annexation of Crimea, Orban initially opposed the sanctions imposed by the US and the EU on Russia, comparing them to shooting oneself in the foot. However, Hungary did not use its rights of veto at the time. Nevertheless, this did not prevent the Hungarian government in 2021 from concluding a long-term contract with Gazprom for the supply of Russian gas until the end of 2036. Under the terms of the contract, Gazprom is to supply Hungary with 4.5 billion cubic meters of gas per year. Hungary covers its gas demand mainly by Russian supply, and before the signing the agreement, it received fuel through a pipeline passing the territory of Ukraine. The new agreement provides for gas supplies by passing Ukraine. The price of gas was not disclosed. It was only specified that this agreement is much more profitable in terms of price than the previous one. As of 2021, the price of Russian export gas for Europe was $518 per 1,000 cubic meters. According to the Russian Foreign Ministry, under the new agreement, Hungary buys gas 5 times cheaper. That is, we can assume that at that time the price was approximately $100 per 1,000 cubic meters. After Russia launched its war against Ukraine in February 2022, the Hungarian government refused to impose sanctions on Russian energy resources. Orban said that if Hungary imposes an embargo on Russian gas, it will mean the disappearance of 85% of the entire Hungarian gas supply. Also, the head of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Hungary, Péter Szijjártó, commenting on the result of the first day of the EU summit in Brussels, announced his country's refusal to supply weapons to Ukraine through Hungarian territory. This drew condemnation by the Polish president Andrzej Duda. It is difficult for me to understand the attitude of Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban to the war in Ukraine, where thousands of people are dying. Although, as he added, Orban himself is in a difficult situation. After all, he brought the Hungarian state to the point where it is almost completely dependent on Russia. Most likely, Viktor Orban could not refuse Gazprom's, because apparently they still hope to receive the 10 billion euros loan from Moscow for the modernization of the Paks nuclear power plant. There are also other questionable energy contracts between Hungary and the Kremlin. During his premiership, which has lasted for 12 years, Viktor Orban met with Putin 12 times. According to Orban, relations with Russia cannot be built on the basis of principles, only profit is important. Viktor Orban, on Kremlin's wishes, granted political asylum to the former Macedonian Prime Minister Nikola Gruevski, who is facing corruption charges in his country. Orban himself may be involved in corruption schemes. Thus, the EU Anti-Fraud Office launched more than 40 investigations in Hungary into the facts of misuse of EU funds. On April 3, 2022, parliament elections will be held in Hungary, which will determine the name of the next prime minister. If Viktor Orban remains in power, then the country's foreign policy is unlikely to change and will remain aimed at cooperation with Russia. In the light of recent events, the war unleashed by Vladimir Putin in Ukraine in particular, the policies of the Hungarian government are likely to cause Hungarians to suffer the same fate as the aggressor country, coming under sanctions as well.